Early morning seminary teachers. Dear friends, there is a throne in heaven for you.
Welcome to Seminary Teachers Helping Seminary Teachers, the podcast where we share ideas, tools, and encouragement to strengthen your teaching and bless your students. Each episode will explore practical tips, inspired resources, and real experiences from the classroom, so you can feel supported and confident in your calling. Whether you're new to teaching or a seasoned instructor, we're here to help each other teach with power and joy.
Hello, teachers. Welcome back. We're moving through church history and Doctrine and Covenants super quick. The way that the Doctrine and Covenants is set out and paced is really front heavy, Kirtland heavy. And then, once they get to Missouri, the revelations kind of slow down. Joseph's in prison, the saints are refugees, and then that's going to continue. We'll get a couple sections here in Nauvoo, but so many of the revelations that Joseph gets in Nauvoo are pertaining to the temple and the endowment, and they're revealed by ordinance, and then the way that he's ordered the church. So, for example, in Nauvoo, the 12 will move into a more administrative role, and he'll also give them the keys of the kingdom. We see the establishment of the Relief Society in Nauvoo. We see the introduction of the endowment ceremony as we would recognize it, which is different than the ordinances that they were doing in Kirtland. And this is the first time in church history that sisters get to participate in temple ordinances as well. We see the introduction of sealing. Plural marriage starts to be practiced in Nauvoo, and not just by Joseph, but by many church leaders, and that will then continue through the pioneer years and into the beginning of the 20th century. So a lot of these things you can see why they weren't formally revelations as such in the way that we were used to at the beginning of the Doctrine and Covenants, which kind of serves as a little bit of a church policy manual and handbook. Now, because of that pacing, we don't have a lot of time in Nauvoo. And so, like this week, as you look at our pacing for this week, we're going to have one lesson kind of overviewing the establishment of Nauvoo. That's even not so much a history lesson, but like a practice lesson. We're going to talk about family history and temple service, which will emphasize baptisms for the dead. We'll get into section 124, patriarchal blessings, and then sustaining our leaders. All of those have relevancy in Nauvoo, but again, it's not like a deep dive into the timeline of Nauvoo. And so given that context going into this week, we don't want our students to feel lost or to feel like what's happening there is irrelevant. With this first lesson, Ricky, on the establishment of Nauvoo, what kind of work can the teachers do maybe on the back end that isn't too burdensome for them, to where they can come in and maybe all of that doesn't transfer into the classroom, but they feel like they know what to bring into the conversation if it's relevant. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like it's everything you said is really, I mean, it's true. Oh, why is my thing not showing? I may have to keep a gallery. We're going to keep a gallery because it's not switching to speaker mode. But
Okay.
it seems like you got to give the curriculum guys a little bit of credit. We are only going to stop at 124, and that's going to be the only scripture for the week, which maybe gives us a little bit more room to explore some of these topics. I'd highly recommend that as a teacher, you spend time reading in Saints Volume 1, the history, the happenings of once Joseph gets released from Liberty Jail, and start reading into the development of the Nauvoo period and the different happenings that start to take place. You get just little bits and pieces kind of mentioned in 124. Like I have in section 124, every time somebody is mentioned, I personally wrote what happened to them. Like you get introduced to people like John C. Bennett's mentioned here. And there's a
Yeah.
whole episode in the Nauvoo
Yeah.
period, church history talking about John C. Bennett or William Law, or these different men who are called to be as bishops. But I actually have written, what happened to these guys. And it's interesting how a lot of these people that helped Joseph kind of establish the Nauvoo, the city, and the way that the church kind of starts to develop its governance, and the introduction of these quorums, and the better understanding of what they're supposed to be doing. A lot of these men don't make it out of the Nauvoo period. They kind of have their moments in church history, and then and then it's kind of like Kirtland. There's many that kind of fall away. And it will be helpful to you as a teacher to be able to do some of that reading.
And the church history topics will have.
Can we show them where this is really quick?
Go ahead.
Like if you're in your scriptures in your gospel library, there is a link in every one of these. There's this historical context or the historical resources for the revelation. So here's some really good like podcasts about the Nauvoo temple. But all those people you were mentioning just now, here's like little vignettes that you can read about each one of them. Look at that list. Like it might be good to show our students that this is a resource built right into your scriptures to where you can go in and just look at all this stuff ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think that's really good.
I mean, it's necessary for you to have it. It's going to give you a little bit of color as you're kind of going through some of these scriptures, but also to be able to, you're not going to have time in class to necessarily have your students discover for themselves some of these characters that are kind of essential. But I would want to mention it as we get through there and kind of see some of these people, their names pop up. We may take a second and just say, here's John C. Bennett, and here's some of the things that are going down.
Well, I think you bring up like really interesting. So there's a lot of new characters that come into play in Nauvoo, and the setting is something that for us would be culturally unfamiliar. Nauvoo, they establish a city charter. They have their own judges. They have their own city government, and it is infused.
They have their own army.
Yeah, they have their own army. Joseph Smith is the first person to carry the title Major General since George Washington in the United States. It's a city infused with the church, and the church is infused with the government.
And it very quickly becomes the rival major city in the state of Illinois. Like it becomes...
Right. It's Nauvoo and Chicago. Right. And so with that, Ryan, as you're looking at that kind of first lesson, that exploring Nauvoo, it's a practice activity. They do give specific stories to maybe go into and go through these practice steps, which I think are really good practice steps. Is there a way that maybe we could incorporate some of the expanded resources that we're talking about here to give the students a little bit more freedom with that?
Yeah, I would say that my biggest piece of advice to teachers is to try not to over prepare this and over teach this. This is a really good opportunity to let your students explore a little bit. So if you're going to use some of these resources like the curriculum, I like how the curriculum kind of starts with this red, yellow, and green light kind of an activity where you can just say like, how confident are you explaining how the saints got, like the questions are about temple and the curriculum, but you could even take it a little bit further and just say, all right, how comfortable are you telling the story of how the saints ended up in Nauvoo? How comfortable are you explaining how Joseph
I
came
think
up
you're
with...
actually, I think you're actually looking at the second one, because the first lesson is just the establishment of Nauvoo.
Oh, is that where I'm at?
Yeah, you're actually looking at the second one, because
let's go there.
Go ahead.
Let's go there, but I would just add, if you're going to do the Relief Society section, because the two that it breaks it up is activity A is preaching the gospel and activity B is establishing Relief Society. I think it would be interesting to connect President Nelson's invitations for women to understand the priesthood and the ability that the Lord wanted, well, as a people, the ability that the Lord saw in the women of the church to organize, but not just to provide, but also to sanctify hearts and to build up. I think there's a quote in here from Joseph Smith. It's tell the sisters their offering is accepted to the Lord, but he has something better for them. I want to organize women under the priesthood. So we're going to use the priesthood power to organize the church, another group. We're just building ourselves even more.
Under the
So-
pattern of the priesthood.
Yeah, so where I was kind of going, and I did mix up the activities, but where I was eventually going to get to is what the Nauvoo lesson wants us to do is to learn how to liken these stories, right? So if you're not familiar with the stories, but again, this is an opportunity to let them go explore. If you want to show them resources, we got all these different people that are being mentioned, or if you want to talk about Nauvoo. But how do these stories, like why should somebody in 2025 care about a story from 1840? Like,
Well, they do.
That should be the starting point, right? Is where do you make those connections between the establishment of Relief Society or the introduction of baptism for the dead or the healings, the miraculous healings on the banks of the Mississippi River? Like, where do students make those connections into the everyday life? And I kind of like how the curriculum kind of walks us through. It's likening, but it's not likening like we've used it before, taking scriptures out of context and like creating our own bumper stickers. It is, let's actually get in the details of the stories and really try to understand what their life was like. And then can we find purpose statements or principles, or even ask ourselves the hard questions like, if I was there, how would I have responded, ... and give them a chance to reflect.
And the details piece of that isn't necessarily events or dates. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about
Stories.
the human element.
Yeah.
Right?
Stories.
As in, how do you imagine these people are feeling? What doubts might they be having? What hopes are they working from? Right? That's the kind of, go for it, Ricky.
Have any of you guys ever done a saints only lesson? Have you ever done a lesson where you were just in saints?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is an opportunity to do that. Like, I like how the curriculum in the establishing Nauvoo, it's got those 4 things, those 4 steps. I would totally just have that up on the board. Find important details, make comparisons to your life, discover valuable lessons, determine personal application. And I would probably take the entire, I'd have to like really break it down, but I'd probably identify purposely as a teacher 7 or 8 good sections of saints that I would have just that they could then go and do those 4 steps, and they could pick and choose. I would definitely, it used to be, we were just talking off camera, prior to this year of DNC, 4 years ago, DNC, there was actually a Relief Society lesson. There's not one this year. This feels like, we'll see if it pops up again, but it feels like this may be the only time you get to. So I definitely have the Relief Society. I definitely those miraculous healings. I'd probably have the rascal John C. Bennett and his thing. I'd probably bring up polygamy, because again, we don't have a polygamy lesson. I'd probably have some of these stories.
Well, we might get it in 132, but
it doesn't look like it. You better look at those verses that you're going to focus on in 132. But it gives them a chance. Let them try and pick.
And I think sometimes we talk about topics because we think, well, we know that this is a little bit of a minefield that might blow up, right? Like plural marriage or women in the priesthood or something like that. Like, I think Nikki did such a great job of modeling how to make something like that relevant, where she went right to the Relief Society and then connected it to President Nelson's teachings, specifically about the power of women in the church. Those minutes that you referred to, Nikki, we can read them. They're available. They're on Joseph Smith papers. As for, like, if you got a bunch of guys here that keep talking. But if Nikki, if you like, why is the story of the Relief Society, why is that such a powerful story for us to lean into here?
Well, I would say because I feel like as a church, in some cases, we forgot why Joseph Smith had, or why the Lord had Joseph Smith establish the Relief Society from the very beginning under the priesthood direction. We've always had a part in the priesthood and using it with authority
Mhm.
and being able to help and teach and provide sanctification and prepping for temple covenants. And so I feel like I would definitely talk
Priests and
about it.
priestesses, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Kings and queens.
And I think we're doing a little bit better of a job of that. And President Nelson has done a lot of that, an invitation for the young women and an invitation for the young men to see their roles in all the different. We support priesthood authority. They support priesthood authority in us, and that is building up of God's kingdom today.
Yeah, it's
But
not just a lesson for the young women. It's a lesson
yeah,
for the young men as well.
I like the idea of having them ask questions and dive into the ones that they're interested in the most. Even have groups set up in their classroom where they could go and learn more about those sections. Um, but if we're going to move on to section 124, it's the same concept of we're going to be talking about the temple again, but this time we're talking about specific covenants and how the temple was made for the saints for sanctification, also for a place for them to go and worship, but really a place for
So
them to.
let's make that transition then.
Okay.
Let's make the transition. First, we'll go to that lesson 207, right, about the temple, family history and temples, which I think emphasizes heavily baptisms for the dead, which is an ordinance that gets introduced here in Nauvoo. Um, but if you were to approach this lesson, Nikki, family history and the temples, where is the relevancy? Where's the immediate relevancy for youth in your mind?
Well, I hope that there is. I would probably ask them. They most likely, within the last little bit, have done some sort of activity where they're finding names, and hopefully within their temple or in their church groups that they're going to the temple. But what I wonder is they're going to the temple and they're feeling good things, and a lot of them are having very spiritual experiences when they go. But do they recognize that the Lord set this up for them way back? The history here that we're talking about in Nauvoo and Kirtland and all of those, this is something that's been a pattern for sanctifying their hearts. So what are they actually doing when they go that is sanctifying? But that is in the curriculum. What are the blessings of family history and temple service? But I don't know, Mason, I'm not sure how active. Like in the case of our youth in Alaska, most of them have to travel pretty far to get to the
Right.
temple.
Same on Big Island. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think having that discussion with them, do you recognize that from the beginning of time, really, but also the beginning of the restoration, there's been a purpose of having temples, and you can do that at home and at the temple by preparing names, or we can come up with ideas. Let
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
share their temple experience.
And they all, maybe not all of them have phones or whatever, but the family tree app is something I think we got to get them into. And there's a couple really like immediately engaging things in there. One is the relatives around me feature. Like doing that as a class and showing that, yeah, we're actually just family here. And then the other one is ordinances ready. Um, and that's actually something, I mean, they can find ancestors, right? How would you, Ryan, how would you utilize the app, or would you
Well, so
utilize
here's
the
where it
app?
gets a little bit tricky. As you know from our time doing online seminary, you have to these students are going to have to know what their church username and passwords are. So that's
Mm,
where it gets a little bit tricky, is if they don't remember what it is, or if they've never downloaded the app. That's where it can be kind of tricky. But I think you can still have the experience. So my wife and I, we get to work every other week in the baptistry as coordinators. And whenever we get somebody that is brand new to the temple, first timers, or a recent convert, a member of the temple presidency will actually come in and talk to them. And one of the messages that we get kind of repeated, and I think this is where the relevance kind of comes in, is we counsel them that we're not here doing baptisms for names, we're doing baptisms for people. And so I think if they have access to the app, then one of the things I might do is have them go a ways back in their family tree. Just find a line and go back as far as you can, and then go to the memory section and see if you can learn just a little bit about that person's life. Like, we need to get our brains wrapped around the idea that when we do baptisms for the dead, these are actual people. They have passed, but they don't cease to exist, which is why the language in the ordinance in the baptistry has changed, where we have taken out the phrase "who is dead." Right? We want to get them into that mindset that these are our ancestors who are as real to us, or should be as real to us, as you and I are to each other. So can we get to that point where that's what it creates the excitement in the work, is we're not just trying to find names, we're trying to find people, right? We're trying to connect
That's really good.
to our bigger family.
Yeah, and your students might have a culture in their family of feeling close to their ancestors. I know that that's a very common gift here in Hawaii, is that appreciation for ancestors and feeling really close to them is a cultural value here, and it's very real and very powerful. Ricky, that switch from family history, which can be kind of like a family history phrase, right? To turning
At
the
least we
hearts
don't
of the
call it
children to the
genealogy
father.
anymore.
Yeah, genealogy, right? Exactly. But like listen to the language of Malachi. I will turn the hearts of the children to the father. Like, what does that describe? And what are some useful, like applicable things that our teachers can do to actually turn
Yeah.
hearts?
Yeah, this I like Ryan's warning is a real one. There's nothing worse than being on the ward side and trying to mop up, when two different accounts are open for one person, and all the issues that come with the church account and username and password. However, my wife is both an early morning seminary teacher and just a family history nut, and this is a passion that she has. What she's told me she's already planning on doing is starting a week or so in advance, reaching out to the youth and their families and their bishops to get any of that cleaned up, and get usernames and passwords known to the students, so that when they do come to class, that's the attempt, is that she's done most of the legwork, so that what they can focus on are names. One thing that she does with our kids, every time we go to the temple as a family and we do the ordinance ready and it pops out names, before we do anything like print cards, we do what Brian says, and we stop and we click on each name and we identify
how are we related to them.
We identify the relationship. We go look and see. We look for a couple of things. This is just part of the work in temple and family history work. We look and see if there are memories, are there pictures, can we identify locations, and then we do a really quick soft training. If there's sometimes there's a what do they call it? Not a notice, a hint. Sometimes there's a hint, and we allow them to kind of explore what that looks like, and it feels kind of lab like, and you can go around and there's some real connection that can happen with this. But then you always have to bring that, because that's always exciting. I love that. Nicole and I, whenever we do FSY, that's one of the things we do with our YSA counselors, is we do relatives near me, and we make those fun connections about who's related. But it has to somehow, some way, go back to the scriptures in section 124 here, so that they can identify. It's verses 29 through, I think that's this 29 through 36 is the focus for this temple and family history section, helping them understand that we are trying to connect them back to God through the ordinances in the temple, and how important priesthood keys are to ordination and to receive honor and glory, and making that connected back to the eternal
Yeah,
perspective of God's plan.
that's good. Let's like we're building on this because we have an emphasis on baptisms for our ancestors. We have an emphasis on turning our hearts there. This next lesson in 124 is going to focus much more on the endowment.
Right.
And the endowment, I'm just gonna like we have to shatter some cultural norms here. Okay. There is in the church I grew up in, and I think it still lingers, there is a fear. It's not just even a hesitancy. It's like a will I get struck by lightning? Will I violate eternal covenants if I talk about the endowment? There are very few things in the endowment that we covenant not to talk about. And they are symbols that are signs, tokens, and keywords. That's what, and none of the things that I just said are things that you can't find on the church's website. Okay. We covenant not to talk about those things outside of special places in the temple. The rest of the temple is not something that we are under covenant to keep secret. Now, Elder Bednar gives us two guiding principles when we talk about the endowment. We're going to focus on Jesus Christ. So all of the temple is centered on Jesus Christ. When we remove Jesus Christ from any part of the center of our religion, things get weird and awkward, right? And feel like they're irrelevant. The other one is we're going to speak about it reverently. So we're not going to do it casually. We're going to metaphorically take off our shoes when we talk about the temple, right? And the reverence, because remember that when you say, as teachers, when you say endowment, they're not going to know what you're talking about. You might have the entire experience or a number of experiences associated with that word, so they're coming in blind to it. The reverence and the care that you use to speak about it, but also the clarity that you use to speak about it, is going to set the tone for the whole conversation. And we'll see that in this lesson in section 124, they're going to direct us to temples.churchofjesuschrist.org, which is there's going to be a description of each phase of the endowment. Right. And so we have so many resources, more resources than we've ever had before when talking about the endowment. Let's set aside that cultural fear, because our students sense that in us when we have that, and then they get weird because they don't know why we're afraid to talk about it. Right. This is an incredible opportunity. And what I hope at the end of this lesson, I hope that our students know that when they graduate high school and when they turn 18, they are able to receive their endowment. And I hope that they have a vision and a goal for that. So Ricky, uh, going into this lesson, I mean, what's your hook? What's the thing that we want them obviously to engage the resources, but like you have a little bit of a spiel at the beginning of the lesson. What are you doing with it?
Well, I mean, the curriculum, that's the one that Ryan was mentioning,
Yeah,
the
that's the
red,
red,
yeah.
yellow, and blue and green light.
Yeah, and it's how confident are you in talking about the temple? And what's interesting is you have that conversation with youth. They have zero problems talking about their experience in the temple, but that's not the endowment. Like, they don't have that experience. Um, so here, maybe this is the wrong hook. Usually when there's something that's a little bit like touchy and culturally we don't know where to go with it, I usually end up going right at it just because I want to get that out of the way.
Yeah, me
there
too.
there's some videos here. If in preparation for this, if you're to just go all the way through the curriculum and just watch every video that they have all the way through the supplemental, you're probably going to get a really good sense of what you should focus on. One of the last videos is the sacred clothing video. I'd probably start with that. I probably would, just because I feel like the idea of sacred space sacred words, sacred clothing, sacred actions. In a nutshell, that is the endowment, and to kind of throw that right out the beginning so that they know, oh, so when we're talking about endowment, we're also talking about the garment. Oh, so there's also these robes called the robes of the holy priesthood. Oh, and the curriculum does great with the covenants. Oh, so there's some sacred covenants that we're going to make. Oh, so like I probably start there because I don't want to get distracted when we start getting into the conversation about the covenants, which are the focus of the endowment. We're able to focus there and not get derailed in the by
I
some
like
kid
that.
going, you know what I mean? So I'd
Yeah,
probably start with a video.
yeah, no, that's really good, and I love that emphasis that you put right there at the end. That like we're trying to get to the covenants, right? Because we talk about the covenant path. Most often, we teach the ordinance path, and we forget the covenants, right? So we're trying to get to the covenants, and we do have to address some of these things up front. Not be afraid of them. They're all beautiful gifts. That's what an endowment is. It's a gift. Ryan, what about you? Where would you go? We've talked about the videos, the resources online. What are some like tips and tricks, wisdom
Yeah,
to give
my
these
my
teachers?
uh my go at it approach would probably be to list the ordinances of the temple on the board and just like, all right, so baptisms and confirmations, initiatory, endowment, sealings. These are words our students have heard, and I might just in partners, like, all right, baptisms, confirmations, you guys could probably explain that really, really good to each other, to one of your friends, probably because you've already done it, right? These are people that have already died. They can't be baptized, so we get baptized in their place. They receive the gift of the Holy Ghost just like any other person, because we believe everybody needs to be baptized to get like easy peasy. I like going then, all right, can you explain to somebody then what is an initiatory? Could you explain to somebody what an endowment? Could you explain what a sealing is? Some of them will have some concept of sealings because some of them may have been sealed to their parents after the fact, like or as adopted, or they've witnessed something. But it'd just be interesting to just kind of get a base of where are they now with their understanding, and then just go, all right, so if I were to show you a place where you could go find out more, because I want to start from this framework of what of where you are now and what I do and don't understand, to where at the end of the lesson, can you now explain it better? And in the middle,
Hmm.
it's here's all the different resources. Like we'll go to section 124 and we'll just like, all right, here's what the Lord said about temples. We're gonna, especially verse 39, we're gonna talk about anointings and washings. All right, which of these five do you feel like that fits in? We're going to talk about solemn assemblies, memorials, and sacrifices. Um, those aren't words we use anymore. Where are we going to stick those? We're going to talk about oracles. We're going to talk about holy places. We're going to talk about the fullness of my priesthood. Like, where do all of these fit in the context of what the Lord is trying to reveal to us? And then let them know that in verse 41, the Lord, like some of these washings and anointings, we can absolutely point to the Old Testament, say, oh, we're restoring Old Testament practices. But then the Lord's also saying that I'm going to reveal to you things that have been kept hid. Not everything we do in the temple is going to have a biblical precedent. And that's okay because the Lord's telling us we haven't revealed this before. This is new to this dispensation, specifically the proxy work, how the endowment is being presented in these ordinances. One of the questions I get when I teach college kids about temple is they'll ask, well, did Jesus receive his endowment like we're talking about here? And the answer is, do you think he covenanted to obey? Did he covenant to sacrifice? Did he covenant to keep the law of the gospel? Did he covenant to keep the law of consecration and law of chat? Like, do you think he's covenanted to obey those? Now, how it was presented might be very different. Um, What we know is that these are eternal laws. How they're being presented are in a very, very different format. So let them explore it and let them
Yeah.
find out where it fits.
And I think that's a good, like, one of the things that an institute sometimes here in Hawaii will do is I'll say, imagine in 1750 the gospel was restored to a young Hawaiian boy, right? And he built up the church in Hawaii, and and then eventually he restored the endowment. What would it look like? What would the
If a Hawaiian
clothes
did
look like? Yeah,
it.
what would the clothes look like? What
Yeah.
would the altars look like? Could the endowment have been restored in a different cultural context? Of course it could have. And of course it would have worked a little bit differently. And that's the case throughout history. The idea that the kind of weirdness around formalized ritual that we might have in a modern North America setting, that weirdness doesn't exist in any other time in the history of the world. That's a modern development. Formalized ritual has been ingrained in how to build community since there were people. And our students are actually more familiar with formalized ritual than they think, like a marriage, like a presidential inauguration, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things where they participated. They don't think it's ritual. They don't think it's symbolic. They just think, oh, this is just how you do things. Well, that ritual is just kind of how we do things,
Why do you
right? And
place your hand
so
on a Bible and raise your
yeah,
hand? Like,
we
why do you
so we
do
don't
that?
we actually don't need to be scandalized by the fact that there are symbols at work here that bring us into relationship with each other and God. Nikki, what insight would you add here?
Well, it is exciting because in our area, temples are being built. So this is a relevant and exciting question for the teachers here in Alaska and probably in all of our areas. But have you guys seen this lately? This is Elder Renlund's talk, Stronger and Closer Connection to God Through Multiple Covenants. I would probably go this direction. What we want them to see is when we talk about the endowment, you're actually just aligning with the baptismal covenants that you made. You're
Mm.
adding to connection to God. And Elder Renlund does a really great job. This talk is fabulous. As a teacher, it'd be great to listen to it just so you could get the excitement to talking about covenants and sanctifying power of God as you commit to Him to do certain things and He commits to you. But this is a nice way to look at it. A chart of covenants. The talk again is Stronger and Closer Connection to God Through Multiple Covenants. It's Elder Renlund. He gave it at BYU, but you can find it in lots. And he even gave a little bit of it in a conference talk as well.
That's a fantastic resource. I love that. I'll just say from when I talk about the endowment, whether to institute or seminary, oftentimes I'll draw a temple, and I'll draw it from the profile, and I'll start kind of in the baptistry at the lower level, and then I'll go into the locker rooms, initiatory room, and then I'll do the instruction room, and the celestial room, and then I'll do the sealing room, right? And I'll kind of just like really like rudimentary sketches out, but it's a good way to kind of guide them through the space because we're not just talking about ideas. In the temple, you are putting on things, you are touching things, you are moving through space, and it's because that's how we learn, right? And so helping them see it. Another resource is I forgot which two I know Elder Bednar was one of them, gave that tour of the Rome temple.
So you got
um
two sets of videos in the curriculum. You've got Elder Anderson and Elder who is that? Is that Elder Renlund? Yeah, Elder Stevens and Elder Renlund in DC, and then Elder Anderson or Elder Rasband and Elder Bednar in Rome. So you got like two
yeah,
different sets of apostles guiding us through the temple.
they literally walk through these rooms. You can pause the video and talk about what's going on and have them ask questions, you know what I mean? Like, we're supposed to see the endowment. We're supposed to see it in context of a sacred space. It's one of the reasons why, and this is another thing I'll say about hesitancy of talking about the endowment. Your students, while you are talking about the endowment, could pull up YouTube and watch a secret recording of the endowment. The idea that we build walls around information, that doesn't really exist or pertain to this generation, right? So it's where are they going to learn these things? And are they going to learn it in the right type of space? Seminary is the right type of space to set the tone for these conversations, showing them the temple through approved resources like these incredible videos that we have. That's the right type of visual space for them to then set the tone and ask the question. And some of them have been through temple open houses or whatever it might be. But like, this is again, I'll just reiterate, the goal here is not to teach them about temples. The goal here is to invite them to connect themselves to Christ through covenant. Um, and and we need to be more urgent as leaders, and as teachers, you are leaders. We need to be more urgent as leaders in inviting really specific next steps. Um, we have some catch up to do on the 200 temples that President Nelson announced, and and building those temples is going to be one thing. Filling those temples is going to be the more important thing. And the attitude of, well, I hope once our kids graduate that eventually they decide to make a covenant, you know, that attitude, that's not going to get it done. I probably talked about this before. I approached a young single adult, young man in our stake. I saw that he hadn't been ordained to the Melchizedek priesthood. He was like 20. And I go up to him and I said, what is keeping you from receiving the Melchizedek priesthood? And that's kind of an aggressive approach, right? But I had a good relationship with him. And he looked at me and he's like, I have no idea how. And so what I thought was, what do we need to change here on your end? Really, like, he just hit me right back with it. You haven't taught me how to do it, right? I'm this priesthood leader. I'm supposed to be the one showing him how to do it. Let's be bold in our invitations as disciples of Christ, as teachers who have been set apart and authorized to represent him. Let's be bold in our invitations and specific to invite our students to make and keep covenants. It's going to be like it. Of all of the things that we could do, I think the greatest indicator of success is not credit or completion of reading. It's our students continuing on the covenant path, right? So we can do a lot of work here. So we got 2 more lessons, and what we'll do for the sake of time is we're just going to split them up between you two. So Ricky, going into patriarchal blessings, give us like a 5-minute at most. What are we doing with patriarchal blessings here?
I can beat that in 5 minutes. Number one, I think because it's right here during section 124, I would highly recommend that you are giving the students a little bit of time seeing that in verses 91 through 94. This is Hiram getting called to be a patriarch. And to see that the Lord calls him a prophet and a seer and a revelator unto my church. Now, understanding, there is an apostleship kind of feel here, but he is referencing his call as a patriarch. They are
Patriarchs are still ordained prophets.
Yeah, they are seers to your stake, and to see the Lord say that is I think important context to the conversation they're going to have. Okay, now I will say, if you don't remember, Jason Willard's training, was that just barely in like February? I can't remember when that was.
I thought wasn't it just the summer?
It
was February training.
He gave that training on life prep lessons. You can look that up it's the broadcast. He specifically references this life prep lesson. He's an ordained patriarch. He's one of our administrators in SNI. And so he thought, well, I could teach this lesson. He goes to a seminary class, and he thought that being an ordained patriarch was going to be, make this a pretty easy thing to do. And what he realized, he did his class. He's like, it was fine. Then he observed another teacher teach the same lesson, and he realized he'd missed it. Yeah, again, you're not teaching patriarchal blessings. That's not what you're doing here. You are teaching them that through patriarchal blessing, through their patriarch, their stake seer, they're going to be able to connect themselves to Christ, hear his voice to them, and be able to take those things, and it can be it's a personal liahona, like fill in the blank. It's their own personal scripture. It's their own liahona. If you can get them to see that that's the case, this is going to be an incredibly relevant lesson. Allowing them opportunities to express how receiving a blessing, how that affected them personally. Obviously, you don't want to take turns reading from each other's blessings during this lesson. That's just, just don't do that. But
It's not appropriate. Yeah.
But they can share how they felt. They can share how they felt as they've read it. How has their blessing affected their lives? You're probably going to have 50-50, depending on the age of your class, between those who have their blessing and those who have not received their blessing. And you want to be able to edify both. Yeah. How do you edify somebody who hasn't received it? How do you edify somebody who has received it?
And again, there's a really clear invitation right here at the end of it. If you have received it, right, re-engage it, engage it often, right? Use it as your liahona to direct yourself towards Christ, to hear what Christ sees in you. That isn't just here and now, but he sees the whole picture. If you haven't received it, I invite you to talk to your bishop about receiving it. Now, again, there's a little cultural thing. You receive it kind of when you choose, right? But them talking to their bishop might not result in them receiving it right away. Them going and counseling with their bishop might be like, okay, well, we're not quite ready yet, but can we set a goal? And can you and I work together to prepare for that goal? It could be, though, that the Lord is urgently trying to tell them something about themselves at a time in their life where they're trying to figure out who they are, and they desperately need that information.
I think it's why we need to remember that the lesson's purpose isn't to have everybody get a patriarchal blessing. The purpose statement says to help students feel of the Lord's desire to guide them in their lives.
Yeah, so good.
He wants to talk to you, but kind of like you're saying, when you're ready. Like this might just be the next step in your preparation. It's not gonna automatically assume that they're all gonna want to go rush out and get their patriarchal blessings if they haven't already. Right.
Yeah,
we want them to help them feel that the Lord does want to talk to them.
Urgently. Yep, urgently. And I don't think it's inappropriate to an invitation for them to go talk to their leaders about it. I think or their parents or whatever.
Or go to the Lord, or go to the Lord himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go ask Heavenly Father if he's ready, if you're ready for a blessing, and if
there is no policy to the age. And it's interesting talking to different people who have received their blessings at different times. And if they're thoughtful and intentional, none of them really feel a lot of regret about when they receive their blessing. So that's all we're trying to do. Let's get them to be intentional in their decisions about this.
All right, Ryan, bring us home. We have lesson 179, sustaining our leaders.
Yeah, like section 124 is the longest section in the Doctrine and Covenants, and almost half of it is about kind of the Lord hitting the reset button on church leadership, church organization. Edward Partridge has died, and so we need a new bishop. We've had we've talked about this previously, but members of the Quorum of the 12 have left. Some have died, and so there's new people being called. We get the introduction of new people, new members of the First Presidency, because Hiram is given a new assignment as the patriarch of the church, but then also as basically the assistant president of the church, which is a position we don't really do anymore. But he basically replaces Oliver Cowdery because Oliver Cowdery was excommunicated from the church. And so we have this. Somebody put it that this is like the ecclesiastical charter of Nauvoo, whereas the Nauvoo charter is the political chartering. This is like the Lord hitting the reset button, or helping us to kind of reestablish his order. And that's a really important word, is this word order, because we talk about ordinances, we talk about ordinations. And so this is order. This is the Lord trying to put in place, and he's already preparing for a massive influx of people, and he's just trying to get everybody straight. Here's who's all their callings, But here's where the challenge is, and this is where the relevance, the lesson stated purpose is to help students understand the importance of sustaining those the Lord calls to lead. And I think that's an important distinction. We want them to feel the importance of sustaining, which means we really need to help them understand what that word sustain means. And I love that the lesson goes through that. So the hook, I like the example in the beginning, and I think this is a really good what if scenario. As youth, like they're very much into this idea of fairness, and there's almost a sense of entitlement. And so a question, something as simple as you've been in the church all your life, new member of the, like one of your friends joins the church, he's been a member for 3 months and he's called to be the class president. Right? He's called to be the president of the teachers quorum, or she's called to be the president of the 16-year-old young women's class. Whatever the case may be, really, really young and experienced, but they are now put in charge. And I use that term in quotes, right? Because leadership in the church is a little bit different. How do you respond? Like, what would be a series of challenges or obstacles in supporting this person, and what would be reasons why you, or what would be some ways that you could overcome those characters or some of those challenges, some of those roadblocks? I think if we can get people in the mindset of thinking about it's not a meritocracy. These are callings of the Lord, then maybe some of those things can kind of get dissolved. What were you going to say, Rick?
Well, I was going to say, which talk was it? Was it Elder Uchtdorf that mentioned that sustaining church leaders is actually a gift of the Spirit?
Like in this most recent conference?
Yeah, it makes a list of, he's talking about gifts of the Spirit, and he's talking about, and then he makes a list of ones we don't even consider as gifts. But he mentions sustaining leaders as one of those gifts of the Spirit, which was interesting because that was right after we just sustained church officers. And I don't know if you guys caught it. There was somebody who opposed the Quorum of the 12. Yeah. And they said, any opposed, and they have to yell because whatever.
It's general conference, because of course.
Yeah. But then like the next talk or next couple of talks, it's Elder Uchtdorf mentioning that's actually a gift of the Spirit. That could be an interesting hook, talking about how is that a gift of the Spirit as you talk about this, because then I like the scenario here too. I think it's great. I had a brother get called to be my priesthood leader, and that was hard.
I think the other scenario is what if it's somebody that you know really well. So like when I received my call to be the stake president of our stake, in our brothers chat, I sent out a text. I'm like, hey, does anybody want to guess what my new calling is? And my brother Scott, being kind of a smart aleck, he goes, Scoutmaster, ha 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 ha. And then when I told him, I was like, no, I was just called to be the stake president. Like there was silence. Like there were no thought bubbles. There were no bubbles. Yeah, it was absolute. And then Scott pops back up. I bet you wish it was Scoutmaster. Ha, ha, ha. But then I got a phone call from my brother Shad, and it was really interesting. And this might be a scenario where you could go. My brother Shad gets on the phone and he goes, "I'm having a crisis of faith right now." Oh yeah, welcome to the club. He goes, all my life I've seen these stake presidents. I've put them on these pedestals, and I've always thought the highest of them, and there always have been these spiritual giants, and now you're one of them. and I chuckled at it because I thought, yeah, like there's when you have to sustain somebody to a position that you know really well, like let's assume it's your best friend's dad that's the new bishop, and you've known this person all your life. Is there anything that you've ever observed about this person that might cause you to go, really, Bishop? Like, I know these things I know these imperfections. In the curriculum, President Eyring in his talk in October 2017, The Lord Leads His Church, was a personal answer to my prayer that after I'd been sustained as a stake president, and then for the next month, just feeling the weight of this calling and just feeling completely and totally inadequate. In fact, as I was traveling around the stake and just meeting the members, just meeting so many people, like, why wasn't he the stake president? He's so much
Mm.
better than me. Like, why wasn't this person? Why wasn't this? Like, I was having the crisis of faith of why me? And I could imagine in my mind others going, really, him? Like, why him?
Well, it's
And,
in
and
in the curriculum. It says we exercise, this is one of the principles. We exercise faith in Jesus Christ when we sustain those he calls to lead. And I'm sure you have youth in your class who have those same feelings of self-doubt when they're asked to lead. And you could probably change that principle to we exercise faith in Jesus Christ when we accept callings from the Lord. It's
Yeah.
almost, it's just the other side of the same principle, right?
One of the things that keeps coming to my mind is as these opportunities, and they really are opportunities to sustain. It's a gift to be able to sustain, not just like, oh, I have this gift, but it's a gift to us to
Right.
yeah,
have the
why do we do
opportunity
it
to
every year?
sustain,
We do it
right?
every year in conference, right?
Yeah.
So the words that keep coming to my mind is like, as we resist or feel that resistance coming or those doubts, like this is never supposed to be about us. If we're the ones called, it ain't about you. If you're the one objecting, right? If you're Shad or Ricky and your older brother who used to pick on you or whatever gets called, like it ain't about you either. Because I can say, like, I knew Ryan a little bit before he was called as stake president. And then I moved into the stake right afterward. And as stake president, President Anderson was a mentor and guide for me. And it wasn't about Shad, and it wasn't about Ricky, right? And so, um, sorry about this. I didn't mean for it to sneak up. But at the very heart of it, this work isn't about us. It's like the Lord is able to do his work through, and the only people he has to do it through is imperfect servants. But those imperfect servants are called and authorized and never perfected, but the keys that they hold and the mantle that sits upon them can change hearts and heal hearts in ways that people can't find. So when we feel that resistance for whatever objection we might think, and sometimes objections are legitimate and there are legitimate ways to express those, um, but let's have faith in Jesus Christ that he is at the head of this church. I think two resources come to my mind, right? Or one real resource comes to my mind right away is we just had the calling of a new prophet. Um, and we got to hear from President Uchtdorf or from President Christofferson, who didn't expect to be called President Christofferson, and President Eyring and President Holland. And to hear them express their sustaining vote for President Oaks.
That might
Uh,
be a great practice for our students is what are
yeah,
things that you can do to sustain our new prophet, President Oaks?
yeah.
Like, yeah, we want to get to that practice as quick as we can of what does this look like to sustain and how will it require faith to do that?
Yeah, and helping our youth know this isn't a vote. Like this,
Right,
that what they see every day in our current political situation is about voting who you think should be in the place. That is not this. This is not an
right.
opportunity to have your voice heard. This is an opportunity to exercise faith. That's what this is. And obviously they're going to ask questions about, well, what if I disagree, or what if I whatever, and that could be a legitimate question that could be answered using some of the resources in the curriculum. But ultimately it's, can you sustain leaders who are called of God, and can you exercise faith that he knows what he's doing in calling those leaders, and what blessings can come from that.
And we can assume faith in our
Yep.
students as well, because we know that they do have faith in Jesus Christ. when has following a priesthood leader
Well,
brought you
and it doesn't
closer
have
to
to be a
Jesus
priesthood leader.
Christ?
This can
Right?
be what if it's a young women's leader? What if it's a Relief Society leader? Like,
Yeah.
They have
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have they have like a variety of scenarios in the curriculum that I think are really helpful.
yeah.
So like give time to practice this, because I feel like you can answer a lot of questions and concerns.
And just for the sake of wrapping up, because we like talking to each other, so we can just keep on going, but you guys are probably sick of listening to us. Uh, this is so relevant for our youth. I can't think of there maybe are just as relevant lessons, but the idea of helping to cultivate a spirit of sustaining living prophets, apostles, leaders in their life, like this is one of the unique gifts of the restoration that's going to be a spiritual lifeline for our students as they grow up in a really chaotic world, that they know where to look for guidance, and that they have a sustaining heart, and we can promise them that as they sustain their leaders with their heart, not just with their hands but with their heart, they're going to have less anxiety. They're going to have more light. They're going to have more peace in their life. They're going to feel more guidance, because the Lord also sustains his leaders, and will back up their words. And so it really is one of the gifts of the restoration, one of our spiritual inheritances, to be able to sustain. And so it's not a throwaway lesson. I know that some of y'all are teaching 4-day weeks, so you're going to have to make some judgment calls on where to put an emphasis. Maybe you combine the two temple lessons, right? But this is going to be something that if we can teach it with a focus on Jesus Christ, it will be a blessing that goes far beyond the 50 minutes that we spend with them this week on that topic. Reach out to us if you have questions, need help. We didn't utilize the chat bot, but again, like that's a resource that's there to help you generate more creative, more relevant stuff. And so we invite you to explore it, and we'll continue to use it.
Maybe as just a quick example, I know I don't need to share my screen or anything, but I was asked to sub, and it was previous week stuff. So I did what I said. What I suggested is I took a teachings from church leaders template, and then I took Elder Holland's lessons from Liberty, and I actually pulled them down into Word documents, uploaded them into the chat bot, the teacher assistant, and I asked it to follow the template and create for me an outline that I can use Elder Holland's talk to teach. And it came out with a good first draft. I made some adjustments, asked it to kind of adjust it some more, and it produced, after about 3 or 4 iterations, I had a handout that I was able to then give to my students that allowed them to study both Doctrine and Covenants, but also Elder Holland's his talk, and then we worked on application questions and finding questions. It was a great activity. So
How long did it take you?
about 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
And it was a fabulous search activity. So
Okay.
Use the chat button. If you have questions or concerns about it, and you want to see something like that in action, reach out to one of your coordinators and we can demo it.
Yeah,
for
we can
whatever
guide
your needs
you
are.
through it. Yep.
Okay. Have a great week, guys. We'll talk to you again.